Sarah Dill, and today I'm a high school counselor in Clinton, Mississippi, which is a suburb of Jackson. And I'm joined by Tori Holloway, the Assistant Director of Outreach for Gear Up Mississippi and Get to College, which has offices in the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Metro Jackson, and North Mississippi, as well as Kirsten Dufour, the Assistant Director and Project Manager at Get to College, and Katie McBride, the Director of the Center for Student Success at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. The first student that you may recognize is Mary. Mary is the youngest of the students we'll talk about today. She's a junior at her high school, so there's still some valuable time to help give Mary ideas about things to consider when she's planning for college. Mary's taken the ACT one time and she got a 19. She was diagnosed with dyslexia a few years ago and has an accommodation plan to help her through high school. It allows her to have additional time on some of her assignments. Mary wants to attend college outside of Mississippi, but she's anxious about leaving her support system of her family and her friends. She's very close to qualifying for a HELP grant in Mississippi, which is a program created by the Mississippi legislature to provide financial assistance for students whose financial need will not be met for other sources, with the caveat that the student attends school in Mississippi. Similar programs would be the TOPS program in Louisiana, the Hope Scholarship in Georgia, the Life Scholarship in South Carolina, or the Florida Bright Future Scholarship Program. Mary needs help signing up to take the ACT again and can probably use some guidance to choose classes for her senior year that'll help increase her GPA so that she can qualify for additional financial aid. So now let's look at some ways to help Mary. When thinking of resources to help Mary, there are some things that I can do as a high school counselor and some resources that I can tell Mary about to use in college. Because Mary is a first-generation college student, she may not be aware of how some things work related to college admissions, and she may not be aware of some of the resources that are available to her once she gets to college. Mary may not know that she needs to take the ACT more than once. She may even qualify for a fee waiver to take the ACT for free. Since Mary receives testing accommodations in high school, she may even qualify to receive accommodations while taking the ACT. That may increase Mary's score and bump her up to a higher scholarship level. Also, Mary could look into going to a college that's test optional. With COVID, everything now is a lot of schools are going test optional. There is a list in a link to a resources page that we'll share later that includes the most up-to-date list that I could find, but additions are being made or extensions are being made to those test optional policies every day. The University of Alabama, for example, sent an email yesterday that they'll extend being test optional for another year. However, I would caution students to really examine all the details related to test optional policies at each college that they're considering. Just because the admission to a school doesn't require the ACT or SAT doesn't necessarily mean that their scholarship distribution is included in that exemption. When Mary gets ready to actually go and visit colleges, she can look at schools in her state and out of state, but maybe within a specific radius so that she feels more comfortable. Another thing to consider would be the financial benefits of going to school within her home state, in addition to thinking about other factors related to transportation and living expenses. Once Mary narrows down what colleges she wants to go to, she can take her high school accommodation plan and ask to meet with the Disability Services Office personnel at each college that she visits. Mary can ask questions about how services are provided to see if those are a good fit for her. Mary can probably continue using some of the accommodations she's using in high school, or she can look into additional supports as her understanding of her needs change. Another link in our resources document will show some tips that may be helpful to Mary as her educational needs change. Mary can also ask about the writing lab on campus or other subject-specific labs. She can talk to a counselor at the counseling center on campus if her anxiety becomes unmanageable. If college financing is an issue for Mary, she can ask to meet with someone in the financial aid office for scholarships that are specific to her school or her major. Mary can also inquire about special programs that may be available at her prospective college for first-generation students to ensure that she forms a strong support system. If you have any other resources that you think might be helpful for Mary, either in high school or college, you can put them in the Q&A section.
Awesome. So as y'all are dropping those in the Q&A section, we'll continue on to the next student. And for a lot of you that are on this webinar, you might be saying, as we go through these students, wait, I know a student just like that. So you may have had experiences where you're guiding students through the going to college process, and access to information is key, or access to certain resources. So please share those ideas, and as we receive them, we'll let everyone know in the session what's being brought in, because this is a collaborative effort. Part of my job at Get to College and working with the Gear Up grant is traveling across the state of Mississippi. And I've seen all of these students that we're going to talk about today. So we want to make sure that we're throwing around ideas, not at just the state level, but also at a southern level of what's out there, what resources are there for students. So continue to drop those in the question and answer. And as we have a little break, we'll discuss those so that we can all be a part of this effort to give the students that we work with the best possible transition from high school to college. So this next student his name is Josh. And this is actually, I have worked with a student. It's not his name, but it's actually modeled after him. Josh is 19 years old. He's a senior in high school with a 2.4 high school GPA and a current 15 on his ACT. I met Josh probably about September of his senior year of high school. So he's a senior at a rural Mississippi high school. He lives at home with his mom, older sister, and 4 younger brothers. Josh's uncle, who played a strong male role in his life, died 3 months into his senior year of high school. And then his older brother died the week after. Josh is now the oldest male in his family. He has no car, but still manages to take care and provide for his family. He aspires to go to college and become a college athlete. He has had 2 junior college coaches reach out to him about playing at their school, but he's unsure of what major he'll pursue, admits he doesn't put much focus on academics, and to be honest, doesn't really know what to do next. So before I show kind of the resources and the tools that I would shepherd him into, drop in the question and answer of how would you help Josh? What would be your first steps? And we'll kind of read those out as we get those in. But you have a student who is the support for his family. So how do you support him in his journey to college? Whether that's looking through the lens of a college athlete, whether that's looking through the lens of a rural student who doesn't have many resources, or whether that's through the lens of a student who has a lower ACT score. Somebody wrote in, like, what about students who are GAP? This is very common for most students who don't qualify for merit aid. Are you referring to maybe taking a gap year between high school and college? Just keep dropping those in the chat, and other panelists, feel free to drop in if you're seeing those as well. How would we help Josh as he transitions from going from high school to college? Drop those answers in there. What does your organization offer for students in this position? As a high school counselor or as an admissions office, maybe you're recruiting a student of this caliber, what would you do?
Hey, Tori, I think what Bill's asking as far as like need gap in terms of financial aid.
Thank you, Kirsten, for that clarification. That's a great question. And depending on where you're from, a lot of community colleges in that area. At the bottom of Josh's scenario, he was looking at community college, and actually in the community he lived in, there was guaranteed tuition if you were from a certain county, and he had no idea. So having conversations with him of what are the resources that are right here in your backyard? Let's go to the next slide. And as you guys think of different opportunities, please drop those. Yes, thank you for that clarification. Referring to, Bill said, referring to students who don't receive full need, which is a majority of Mississippi students. They don't come out of high school going into college just because they have financial need, receiving that full need. So that's kind of the first place we would start. Asking him, okay, what's your college fit? Let's figure out you're an athlete. Several community colleges are all obviously pursuing him. Let's talk about what financial aid assistance you're going to receive. Introducing them to what the FAFSA is. As a student dives into their senior year, and they're obviously the support. One thing that stood out to me about Josh is he knew his mother's social and he knew all his siblings' socials. So he was obviously the caretaker and provided all that information from his family for his family. So, okay, let's talk about financial assistance. Did your mom file taxes? Let's fill out this FAFSA application once October 1st gets along and see if you qualify for any federal aid. Maybe you need to explain what the financial aid award is. I work with a lot of students. I worked with a student just last year that had taken out their student loans because the financial aid office at the university had gone in and did their master promissory note and all that stuff. And they had taken out $20,000 in loans after 4 years and had no idea. So taking the time to sit down with students and say, hey, let's go through line by line your financial aid award. If you're getting an academic scholarship, if you're getting an athletic scholarship, if you're receiving federal aid, sometimes that extra 5-10 minutes of explaining that award is exactly what they need to help them just understand what they're stepping into. On the resource page at the end of this presentation, we're going to give you access to resources. I have links. Get to College has an incredible YouTube channel that walks through FAFSA section by section. So if you're not familiar with the free application for federal student aid, you can check out that resource to learn how to advise students and parents on figuring that out. I did see someone drop in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read this. They said, when I have students who are unsure about what they want to study in post-secondary or what career they're interested in, I find it's helpful to both use an interest inventory and aptitude test so that they connect what they are good at with what they like. Then use that to look at college options. We try to do this with every student during the 10th grade and edit as needed. I think that's an incredible, incredible piece. On the slide here, you'll see online career assessment. A lot of times just telling a student that you're interested in what pathway they're taking is a game changer for them. Having those aptitude tests and interest surveys. What I did was on that resource page, you're going to see a link to one of many online career assessment tests. Definitely do that. Personality type, all just figuring out, narrowing down, what do you not want to do? What do you want to do? Thank you for that input. So having that conversation with them of, you know, you're 19 years old, knowing what you're going to do for the rest of your life might not be what you find out tomorrow, but let's figure out what you're interested in. So that's a great piece. Also on the high school level, educating your high school athletes about NCAA guidelines. In Josh's case, he wasn't going to be eligible due to his the classes he was taking in high school to be a Division I or a Division II athlete coming straight out of high school. But he was able to go to community college, which the National Junior College Association has very relaxed standards when it comes to eligibility, whereas Division I and Division II schools do not. So it's important to kind of talk to your athletes, make sure with your coaches that they are making sure that their top athletes are taking the correct classes. So kind of going through that as you're working with athletes, especially athletes that maybe don't have an advocate in their corner, making them aware. There's resources to becoming a college athlete on that resource page, so we'll have that for you as well. Next is ACT and or SAT prep. So for Josh, he was sitting out a 19, which in the state of Mississippi is above the state average. You guys may know your state average, but for him, it was to receive any academic aid at his universities. He was going to have to get his ACT test up. So encouraging him to do ACT prep, going online to free resources. We always want to point students to where it's free. We link some of those resources in our resource guide as well. Now, transitioning over to the university level, the community college level is key because you may only have, half of you may only have the student when they're in the high school, when they're with you. Summer hits, they go to college, you may lose touch. That we have to connect them to their advocate on a college campus. On several college campuses across the South, you'll hear of TRIO programs, federally funded programs I know in Mississippi, we have 3 or 4 across the state at different universities. So connecting them to those programs that are going to help first generation students be successful in college, especially after this year of a pandemic and online learning, having someone to connect the dots with them of what offices do I visit? Who's going to help me with online learning? Who is my academic advisor? If we can connect them to their advisor, then that's one more person that can help keep them accountable, one more advocate in their corner. Another point to point out is transportation assistance. Several communities, maybe cities, I know in the South it's a lot different. You might have to rely on the college for public transportation. Maybe there's a shuttle bus that comes at certain times, connecting them with that information of he doesn't have a car, so how is he going to get, maybe he has a job, to his job, to the school, from class to class if it's a big university campus. So just finding those little pieces that maybe we don't think about off the bat, but connecting them to someone who has those answers. Maybe it's an admissions counselor, maybe it's an advisor in student success. Also, there are days of celebration, First Generation Student Celebration Day. I'll link some information in the resources about that. And then college athletic advisors. If a student's an athlete, they more than likely have an academic advisor that's there making sure that they're making the correct grades and staying on track. So just making them aware of those. Josh, for example, I found out a couple weeks ago, he has since dropped out of college, just a lack of support there. So it just shows that we've got to connect these students to the right people that are going to help shepherd them there. Okay. If you have any questions or any more comments about Josh or what you would do to help a student in his situation, please drop them. We want this to be collaborative. You can just drop them in the question and answer box. We're unable to use the chat, so just drop them in question and answer, and then we'll read them out as we receive them.
Thanks, Tori. All right, so now we get to meet Carlos. And I know a lot of our colleagues here at SACAC have experience working in this space. So we are collaborative, like Tori said, and we would love to have your expertise in supporting any of these student populations that we're sharing today to share out with colleagues. So again, feel free to use the Q&A and share your expertise of working with any of these student scenarios. So meet Carlos. Carlos lives with his mother and father and older sister in Mississippi. The only person in Carlos's life that is a documented U.S. citizen is his older sister, and she financially supports the family. Carlos's parents came to America on work visas, but extended their stay past the deadline and are currently undocumented, but are in the appeals process. Carlos was not born in America and was brought here when he was an infant and is considered a DACA student. His parents are concerned about how they will pay for college, and Carlos is worried about the recent ICE raids in his community. A student's immigration status is one of their many identities. Students' and families' identities are more complex than being undocumented. To meet undocumented students' needs, we as educators must work with and for undocumented students. Many undocumented students live in mixed immigration status families and/or do not qualify for policies that would stop their deportation, such as DACA. As professional educators, our views of students and our work are influenced by numerous factors, including legislation. To know how to best meet the needs of undocumented students, it's important to understand the policies that impact them. So let's talk about some common phrases that you may have heard around students like Carlos so that we are all on the same page. Undocumented, people who are not U.S. citizens or permanent residents of the U.S., who do not hold a visa to reside in the United States and who have not applied for legal residence in the U.S. Federal DREAM Act. It's a proposed piece of federal legislation that would provide a pathway for permanent residency and U.S. citizenship for qualified undocumented immigrants from 2001 to 2010. The DREAM Act was introduced again in 2017, but was not extended by Congress until the December 2020 Supreme Court ruling on the Department of Homeland Security versus Regents of the University of California that restored DACA to its original 2012 form. On January 20th, 2001, DACA was reinstated. What is DACA? So it's an acronym that refers to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is a renewable program that protects qualified individuals from deportation and gives them a work permit for 2 years. Let me ask you to drop this response in the Q&A as either a yes or no. Do all undocumented youth qualify for DACA? Seeing some responses come in.
Seen a lot of no's.
All of those no's are absolutely correct. So here are the DACA qualifications for your knowledge. Have to have been under the age of 31 as of June 15th, 2012, have entered the US before turning age 16, have continuously resided in the US since June 15th, 2007, and up to present time, have been physically present in the US on June 15th, 2012, and at any time of applying for DACA status, have had no lawful status on June 15th, 2012, currently enrolled in college or have returned to school, have a high school degree or GED, or honorably just discharged from as a US veteran, and have not been convicted of certain crimes. So that's a really robust list. I'll talk about some really great resources for students who are applying for DACA.
Hey, Kirsten. Mm-hmm. We have some activity in the question and answer. First, I want to ask, are these qualifications going to be found readily online?
Absolutely. One really great place that you can find DACA resources to understand who qualifies and what information is needed is Scholarship A-Z. I actually have it linked in the resources that we'll share at the end of the presentation that goes directly to DACA assistance and understanding who qualifies for DACA and the checklist on how to apply for DACA since it's been reinstated.
Awesome. We also have somebody that was just dropping in. They said, I would first make sure to meet with his family to see how far they're willing for him to go for college. Due to different legislation in different states, many families fear sending their students far away. In Tennessee, they can ask your immigration status when they pull you over when driving. So we have some families not even able to attend school events. Therefore, they want them to stay close to home. So I need to research schools in our area that are DACA friendly.
Absolutely. And we'll get into that in just 1 second. We have a few little other updates legislatively and definitions to get into. That's a fantastic point, is that just because one state has one status, the state next door may have a completely different take and status and friendliness to undocumented students and families. So there are actually approximately 2.5 million undocumented youth in the US. According to the Urban Institute, there's an estimate that 65 to 80,000 undocumented students who live in the US for 5 years or longer graduate from high school every single year. Of those 65,000, only 5 to 10% enroll in college. And of that 5 to 10%, only 1 to 3% graduate from college every year. That funnel is really big to very, very tiny for these students. So what type of higher education are most undocumented students attending? Community colleges. Of those 5 to 10% that enroll in college, the large majority, 60% of undocumented students are attending community colleges. The reasoning is often about the cost and the proximity to family, as mentioned earlier by the comments. Community colleges are more inexpensive than many colleges and universities, allowing out-of-pocket expenses that oftentimes undocumented students have to cover to be not as high as compared to universities. So let's get back to Carlos's scenario. He's concerned on how to pay for college. As you can see, he's an average college student academically. What financial aid or undocumented student resources could we recommend to him, both from the high school side and the college side? So let's start with the high school side. As mentioned earlier, what are ways that you as a high school representative, counselor, teacher, whatever's joining us, whatever role you have, can make your office or classroom or institution a safe place where undocumented students feel welcome and supported? You can drop those in the Q&A that maybe can share with other colleagues who are learning in this space as well. If you have students who are working to apply for DACA and need resources such as video recording on filling out the DACA application, a page-by-page guide, DACA renewal checklist, and DACA renewal scholarships, then as I mentioned earlier, Scholarship A through Z is your place to go. All of this and more is provided on their website, as well as details on the DACA eligibility and printable flyers on the top 5 things to know about the reinstating of DACA. I see some activity in the Q&A. Tori, what you got?
So a lot of people are just saying that it's really important for them to provide financial information for everyone, you know, not just students that it's easy to give that info to, and including those who are DACA and or undocumented, and then finding schools that are friendly for those type of students.
Absolutely. And I've got a really great resource for how to find those and then talk about some scholarships. So let's keep going. One great resource that you need to absolutely add to your toolbox is Get Schooled. It's a free digital college advisor that helps with college search. Also has a lot of undocumented resources and actually a scholarship listing of over 50 plus scholarships specifically for undocumented students. If you're a high school counselor joining us today and you're already at your max bandwidth, which I'm sure a lot of you are, check out Get Schooled and add it to your toolbox for your resources. The United We Dream is the largest immigrant youth network. If you have students that are interested in advocacy or empowering their voice in the space of undocumented or Latinx community, really encourage them to consider United We Dream. The priorities of the group include education access for immigrants, protecting LGBTQ immigrants, and empowering students to begin their own campaign with resources and toolkit. 2 things that I want to highlight with United We Dream. First, they actually offer an Undocu Peers certification program, which is a 4-hour interactive training to provide educators tools to begin or to continue conversations on how to better support and work alongside undocumented immigrants by streamlining departmental support and resources across the institution. Secondly, they provide an abundance of toolkits to support educators who are supporting undocumented students on a large variety of topics, such as mental health, immigration, immigrant entrepreneurs, taxes, and a plethora of other topics. Now, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about student support from the colleges side. As we mentioned earlier from the Q&A, encouraging students to find their state or the state that they plan to go to colleges attending Immigration Rights Alliance or Coalition is an important first step. Every state handles immigration rights and approaches differently. I did some checking, and every state in SACAC has some sort of independent organization to support immigrant rights. This can be a great plan of support for your students as they are transitioning to a new state or even just a new community. One misconception you may have heard is that undocumented students can access federal aid by completing the FAFSA. This is not true. Undocumented students are not eligible for federal aid. However, students with DACA status can fill out the FAFSA to get a student aid report, which can be used by colleges or private scholarship providers. As of Friday, April the 9th, President Biden's discretionary funding request for fiscal year 2022. As a part of his request, he requested the expansion of the Pell Grant for eligibility to DACA recipients with qualifying income. As mentioned earlier, it's important to know what legislation is happening in this space for your students. Now, this is just a request to Congress, and it's not required to fund the president's vision for the Pell Grant expansion. So keep watch as lawmakers begin the appropriations process this spring, but we did want to put it on your radar that this may be opening up eligibility for DACA students. So let's talk about some college-specific scholarships and another qualifying definition. So international students is how most colleges and universities consider any student who currently holds a visa or any type a visa that is seeking to be considered educational and is usually considered international. Undocumented students are often not viewed as international applicants because many do not qualify for a visa. Additionally, undocumented students should not have to go through the international admissions process as they cannot provide an international student visa. For those of you who are from the admissions offices joining us today, if you're not familiar with your school's policy around undocumented students, this is a great opportunity for education. For the high schools representatives here, making sure that you're asking your recruiters when they visit what opportunities are available at their institution for undocumented students and being knowledgeable. There is great news, I promise. Undocumented students can qualify for private scholarships. It's up to each student if they want to share their immigration status with the scholarship review committees. There are numerous organizations that provide scholarships or access to scholarships available to all students, regardless of immigration status. Some of these are Golden Door Scholars, the Dream.us, My Undocumented Life, Scholarship A to Z, MALDEF, Dreamers Roadmap, and Immigrants Rising. I've linked all of these websites to the resources document. I know I just listed a lot, but one that I wanted to certainly highlight for this group is the Dream.us. It's an organization that provides the Opportunity Scholarship. They created this scholarship for dreamers who live in states that are effectively have no access to college, either because they face paying out-of-state tuition or because their state will simply not allow them to be admitted to universities because of their immigration status. These states, according to the Dream.us, are referred to as lockout states. So if you're joining us from South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi, you really want to pay attention, because for your undocumented students, they may qualify for this very lucrative opportunity scholarship of up to $20,000 a year. Hopefully, Carlos's scenario has helped you gain an understanding of college access for undocumented and DACA students, and it's just a start to conversations within your institution or your high school on how to support this population.
Kirsten, we did have one question. Somebody asked, do you have a top resource for learning more about helping students with college/financial aid applications without social security numbers?
Yeah, in the resources document, there are several organizations that I mentioned, such as the Dream.us, as well as Scholarship A to Z, that really talks about supporting students that are undocumented in the completion of those applications without social security numbers. So they are the great resources. Anybody here, I know that there's a lot of SACAC members. There's actually a SACAC undocumented student guide that I've also linked on the resources. I know that some of my colleagues that are in this webinar as participants have experience in this space. So I would love to hear in the Q&A any resources that your organization provides or experiences that you've had. So while this conversation is ongoing, feel free to continue to drop those in the Q&A as we move to our last scenario.
There we go. Just like living in the world of virtual, I had myself muted. So let's talk about our last student, who is Erin. So Erin is a first-gen transgender female. She receives the full Pell Grant. She has a 3.25 high school GPA and a 20 on the ACT. Erin is actually a college freshman, and she is attending an out-of-state college and is unfortunately not available for any of the state aid that would be offered to her as a student. So coming into college, Erin was interested in her university's living learning community for first-gen students, but there was a question whether she would be able to live in the female residence hall for that community because that residence hall featured community bathrooms. Erin did perform well academically her first year of college, but was not eligible for additional merit scholarships at the university based on her ACT score. So in her first year, she faced having a balance at both the end of her fall and spring semester, which created a barrier for her to register for her following year. even with receiving the maximum Pell Grant, she was unable to enroll until she got those balances paid down, and really struggled with enrolling for her sophomore year. So I want to move quickly through these resources so that we're able to share everything that we have. So we'll go ahead and move on to the list of resources that might be available. One thing I definitely want to say at the outset of this is that this student has a lot of intersectional identities. So many of the resources that have been discussed with our previous resource students are going to be applicable in Erin's case as well. So we know that she's a first-generation college student. Many of the resources that were available for students like Josh will be applicable to Erin as well. We also know that she's an out-of-state student, so you're going to want to have conversations with her about what kind of resources she needs to explore in the state where she is attending school, especially from the high school side. Now, as far as a counselor who might be working with this student in high school, some things to keep in mind and be cognizant of is, creating your office as a safe space for these students. We know that there's a lot of legislation around LGBTQ students in educational spaces, so it's important to make sure that you create a safe space for them. There are a lot of great resources out there about how to support and serve as an ally for these kinds of students who identify with these communities. So I've shared some of them here. Just the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network specifically provides services and resources and just great advice for how to support these students. There's also some great lesson plans available if you want to have these conversations in your classrooms or with your students through the Live Out Loud project. Also some great resources there about starting student organizations and communities so that your LGBTQ students can build a community for themselves on campus. And then one that we might all be very familiar with is the Trevor Project. There's a lot of great resources that are available through the Trevor Project. And on our resources list, there are links to each one of these things. And you as the professionals may also have great resources about how to support these students in high school, especially if they are coming out and identifying to you or identifying themselves on campus as LGBTQ or even as LGBTQ allies. And that's another important thing to note is if you are an ally, just making that known to students can really help them feel more comfortable reaching out about resources and support. A lot of high schools and colleges now have programs where individuals can be trained to serve as allies and then an opportunity to identify themselves to students on campus. From the college side, again, a lot of great resources that you want to make sure that your student might be aware of. As a first-gen student, TRIO programs are going to be really helpful. One of the great things about TRIO is that it's a federal program. And so many institutions across the region are going to have some sort of TRIO student support office on their campus, which is going to offer a lot of academic support, as well as some limited financial support. So even though Erin in this case may not have been eligible for competitive admission scholarships, if she gets plugged into the TRIO program, then she might be eligible for some additional assistance through the TRIO program at her institution. Obviously, also crucial is encouraging your student to look into what kind of LGBTQIA resources there are on campuses that they're considering. Is there a resource office? Are there student organizations for this community? Are there allies on campus that they should be on the lookout for that they can connect with? For example, at Southern Miss, we have an opportunity for all faculty, staff, and students to go through ally training and then be able to identify themselves both online and in their physical space as an ally, so a student knows who they can communicate with. When you are considering things like living learning communities and housing and residence life, it's really important for the student to look into the specifics of each institution. What opportunities are they going to have for living accommodations on campus? If they're particularly interested in a living learning community, what is the setup? Are there private bathrooms? Is it community bathrooms? Do they allow students to live in residence halls with their preferred gender identity? Those are sometimes really tough questions to ask, but it's important to have students to develop some self-advocacy skills early on so that when they do find themselves in college, they're being comfortable advocating for themselves and reaching out to finding out what those resources are. And then in the case of Erin, there are a lot of additional financial aid resources that can be explored for students once they find themselves on a college campus. In Erin's case, we know that she's gotten the full Pell Grant, but we also know that she was not eligible for any state aid as an out-of-state student, and that she didn't qualify for any of the competitive scholarships based on her ACT or GPA. This is the time where it's really good to explore external scholarships or upper level scholarships at an institution, or even major-based scholarships. So there are a lot of institutions who you'll have your admissions-based scholarships, but then as students move through their academic program, there may be scholarships specifically for their major that you want to encourage students to look for. There may be an additional scholarship application that they should be filling out each year. So it's really crucial for them to stay in communication with their financial aid office and for their undergraduate scholarship office if there is one available. For example, at Southern Miss, we have a completely separate application process for continuing students at Southern Miss, where they can be considered for additional scholarships. We have a program that starts in sophomore year for students who have unmet need. And so in this case, this is an actual student that we worked with, though again, this is not their identity, but we were able to get that student connected with some additional financial resources beginning their sophomore year, so that they were able to get through that first year and then connect with additional resources moving forward. So that's a lot of information to process, and I know I went through those things really quickly. There are resources for many of the things that I mentioned listed on the resources page. I see that there are a couple of questions that are coming through that I'll try to answer here in these last few minutes. But Kirsten, if you want to go through to the resource page so that folks can scan that code and have access to that, please feel free to do that. As far as recommendations for certified programs for ally training, I do not, but what I would say is go and look at the list of resources that I have provided. I don't know if they are all going to be certified programs, but there are definitely going to be some resources there that you can take a look at and identify as, okay, is this a good resource for me or not? Is this something that I want to use? But if you're on the college side, I would say look at your institution, find out if there is an LGBTQ resource office, and then find out if they offer any resources for students.
Awesome. We know that this was a lot of information that we gave to you all, and we did it in a short amount of time, but just a reminder, we want you to take this QR code. What I can do is I can get in and copy the link to the document, and I'll drop that in the chat box for you all. So if you're not able to do the QR code, I will drop that in the chat box. But continue the questions. If you have any information, please let us know. We'd love to continue getting that out. We can build this document out as much as we possibly can so that we can make sure students have the resources and information they need. Thank you all so much.
if you don't have the Q&A pulled up as you're leaving, make sure that you do that. There's some really great connecting that's happening in the space of supporting these student populations. We appreciate Alice. Thank you for the work that you do and offering your contact information to support students in the North Carolina area. And we hope that you find the document useful. Sarah had a really great point in supporting students who have perhaps are homeless because of their coming out experience. They can utilize McKinney-Vento on the high school side for contacting your district or community homeless liaison. We know the McKinney-Vento provides support on the high school, and then as far as financial aid purposes on the colleges side. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing that out. We appreciate everybody joining us today, and we will let you go on with your afternoon or morning activities and hope that this is the start of the conversation to supporting these student populations. Everybody have a great day.